Hello there. Welcome to another episode of Herron Perspective, insights into leadership, culture and technology. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Euan Blair, CEO of Multiverse. Good morning and welcome, Euan.
Morning. Great to be here.
Good stuff. All right, so some exciting conversations today around Multiverse, apprentices, AI. Let's just start for our listeners and viewers. I'm quite well briefed on Multiverse, but tell us what you've been up to. I mean, from my perspective, enormous exponential growth since you founded the firm 10 years ago. But more importantly for me, actually, what you're doing and the impact you're having on apprentices. Tell us about Multiverse.
So look, I founded the organization because I believed that technology was going to become increasingly ubiquitous for non-technologists. And if we could democratize access to technology careers, if we could start to train people on the job, and particularly people from parts of the labor market where they hadn't been sufficiently exposed to technology, we could not only unlock massive productivity gains, but we could keep people in work for longer, provide career mobility, and help transform companies and the workforce. And I think with the advent of AI, that's become even more urgent, and it's been a massive tailwind for us because businesses are all trying to figure this out. And the easiest way to actually deal with AI is train people in how to use it effectively.
Exactly. And can I ask, how did your personal experience impact your professional journey? So you're university educated, as am I. You did a master's, I think, in international relations. I did a master's in war studies. I don't use it very much. Bit of low-level guerrilla warfare sometimes with my competitors.
We can talk about Peloponnesian War if that's helpful.
But I can see how personally and professionally devoted you are to apprentices and why they're so important and the difference that brings to a workforce. Was it some of your personal experience coming out of uni and into the workforce that made you maybe influence your professional thinking here?
In many ways. Look, you touched on something there in terms of, don't really use your degree. This disconnect between formal education and your kind of entire working career, the idea that a shot of learning at the start of your career would see you through multiple decades of work in a changing world just made no sense to me, right? I learned everything I knew about finance on the job in my first job in banking. And this kind of friction, the only way to overcome it is to basically start to first commit to the idea that education should be lifelong and constant. And second, it should be rooted in the workplace. I knew a lot of super smart people who were completely alienated by an academic classroom-only learning environment. But when you allow them to apply learning to their jobs, it was transformative. And you couple that with the fact, we've had a 20-year relentless march of software tools, and yet globally productivity growth has basically stagnated. And that's because we've invested in the technology components. We haven't invested enough in the human components. So it was a sort of confluence of all those things that made me think, okay, we could build something really profound here.
Yes. So a bit less about what you know, maybe coming out of uni, but more what you can do
with it. Yeah. Right. My interest in learning has never been teaching people either just kind of for the sake of learning or things that they actually really want to learn. I think there are plenty of avenues to do that. Teaching people, though, how to be more effective at their jobs, how to actually progress longer term, and how to kind of achieve the sort of outcomes both they and their employers desire, it's a great thing. Everyone wins, right? It's beneficial for the worker, beneficial for the employer. That kind of mutual benefit, I think, is exactly what makes an apprenticeship so appealing.
Yeah. And how do you see the popularity at the moment? I mean, you're sitting next to a CEO who's heavily invested in apprentices. We had 29 start last Monday in Birmingham, and you should see the smiles on their faces. They're super keen, hungry to learn, full of curiosity, full of versatility. How's your business model at the moment? I mean, did I hear that you're getting one application every 11 minutes or something for apprentices coming in?
More than that, right? And so there is a massive desire for people to go and do apprenticeships, but at every age and stage, right? We have apprentices ranging from 18 to, I think our eldest apprentice is 68. Right?
Yeah, right.
And it is really, really valuable, right? They see the value, not just linking it to employment, but crucially, the desire for people to learn technology skills and about AI in particular is massive. Everyone realizes AI could be a big threat to their jobs. But the reality is AI is probably not going to take your job in the near term. Someone with AI skills just might.
Yes.
So if you can combine a kind of job progression or route into work with technology skills, largely focused on AI, you're doing something that, again, is just kind of mutually beneficial. So there's a sort of obviousness to it that is actually really helpful in
Yeah.
our business.
I think it's incredible, Euan, the hope that you give to people, and the hope is real because we see it in practice.
Right.
So my kind of famous example, maybe 6 months ago or so, in a backseat of a taxi in Liverpool, and this guy was sort of asking what I did, and he was sort of late 50s. He said, I'd love to retrain in that, but there's just no way I'd be able to. And it's like, no, there is a way. And there's so many examples, as you say, where no, that is possible. And then with that then comes the social diversity as well, which I think must be crucial for any workplace.
Yeah, it is. It matters. And all the data shows it matters. But also, we work with nurses and doctors in the NHS. We work with operations managers. We work with children's services workers at local authorities. We work with factory workers, retailers. There are just lots of people in the economy who haven't traditionally had access to those kind of opportunities, and we can use apprenticeships to give them to them. You touched on something really important, though, which I admire massively about you, and I think you see this at the best companies we work with. You as CEO of the company are saying, this is not something I'm going to simply outsource to my kind of people or HR function or anything else. I care about this as a leader. I see the value this is going to bring our organization, and I'm going to personally make sure I can help direct it and invest in it. That matters massively, and probably the biggest positive shift I've seen on this area, helped by AI, because every CEO, every C-suite leader has to have an effective response to what they're doing with AI. It basically means that you're able to elevate the status of those programs and that training, but crucially link them to organizational goals. The most effective apprenticeships we see are when there is a really clear correlation between where does the organization want to go, what are the big goals of the company, and how does that translate into the projects and use cases apprentices are creating?
Yes.
Because they also then get the feeling that they're at the vanguard of the change happening in the organization.
Exactly. Creates a connection and that sense of purpose as well.
Right.
I mean, we're clearly on the same page of massive evangelists and practitioners of the support of apprentices. When you go and see businesses and or governments, do you get anything that frustrates you? Do you get any pushback? What do you think, could, orchestrate or elevate this push even further?
I think the biggest frustrations are things like misconceptions, right? The idea that an apprenticeship is only for a certain type of person at a certain point in their career. I think it's a big thing to overcome. We spend a lot of time talking about that. I think a sense, again, that employee training is a sort of pure employee benefit as opposed to a business or organizational benefit. One of the things we've spent huge amounts of time and investment on is quantifying the ROI, right? So, because look, I'd love it if every organization in the world just wanted to do good things, but let's be real, right? They've got loads of distractions and priorities. Most of them do, but they need things that are actually going to generate alpha for their business, that are going to help them kind of execute on their plans. And so if you can show, right, this is actually saving you huge amounts of money over the next few years, or this is allowing you to generate lots more revenue or win more customers or whatever else, that kind of value really matters. And it was actually AI. There is so much heat and light around AI. And the biggest challenge we typically see is turning it from this kind of theoretical concept that everyone realizes is important into something that individuals can actually focus their work on, deconstruct and reconstruct their workflows around what is possible with AI. And that just requires the hard yards of training on the job. It actually brings me to a question I wanted to ask you, if I could, Michael. Like, what are you guys doing specifically around AI in the workforce? Because I love hearing this directly from CEOs, because often their organization isn't even aware of just what's happening and some of that kind of longer term planning that's going on.
Yeah. So for me, it's top down and bottom up. The top down is the piece that you mentioned around you've got to have the leader of the organization who gets it and wants to do it and wants to embrace AI for good. Yeah. Right. I don't subscribe to the doom and gloom of it. It's about embracing it. So it has to come top down. Yes. I think my favorite mantra at the moment is, the business transformation is the skills transformation. Yeah, so therefore it's all about the skills and the people. So part of it is around the education and the equipping and making AI and use of tools and such part of what we do every day. But I think it's more than that. You can't just give people tools and then say that you're
have at it.
Exactly. It's much more three-dimensional than that. I think it's cultural, and I think it's bottom up as well. And what's great about all of these apprentices that come in is they're kind of AI native and trained anyway. To your point of, listen, don't worry too much about whether your job's going to go or not. The best thing you can do at the moment is just get trained up and educated and use it day in, day out and become savvy with it. And that's the bottom up. If that meets the top down, it really works. Yeah. And then my job as the leader is to make sure that we have the right tools, but also the right commercial models for our customers, the right proof of values, if you like, for our customers, where we're massively decreasing the time to value for their projects because of agentic and humans. But perhaps most importantly, it's the different career portfolios for our people.
Right.
So it is a truism that agentic today is eliminating some of the roles, okay? But it's also a truism that some of the roles that were previously in existence are now evolving into slightly different roles. And most beautiful for me is we have a column of new roles that have been created that are necessary for mixed human and agentic teams.
Yeah.
And those roles did not exist 6 months ago.
Right.
Yeah. So I just don't subscribe to AI is going to take out all of the jobs. I mentioned in one of my other podcasts, we need to fact check it, but it was something like 70% of the roles in 2025 in technology didn't exist 15 years ago.
Correct.
And so I think it will be the same in another 10 years. So it's just, as leaders, we have to have the confidence that it's not just the here and today, that new roles will emerge. And therefore, it's about equipping and reskilling the workforce into these new roles.
Right.
And it's the apprentices, ironically, that are the best fit for some of the roles that are evolving in some of their new roles. Because I don't recruit anymore for, how's your Java skills, you? Yeah. I recruit for, how's your curiosity? How's your growth mindset? Are you a versatilist? Because I can get the agentic to do some of the specialist stuff, but I need the versatility, if you like, and the curiosity and the right mindset to manage and work in those mixed teams of humans and agents. That is the most exciting thing about my job, is new career portfolios for our people.
Right. I mean, and it's great you as CEO sharing that kind of message. I think AI is both the biggest threat and the biggest opportunity to the workforce. We can maximize the opportunity and mitigate the threat by training people on the job. This is why this is really important and it really matters. And yes, jobs will be displaced, but if you have a new kind of group of worker from every part of the economy that is basically sufficiently agile and sufficiently AI literate, that transition doesn't have to be the sort that we saw through deindustrialization. I mean, deindustrialization left huge parts of countries around the world behind. We're all paying the price for that today in our politics, in the kind of financial outlook, and we weren't sufficiently considering how we get ahead of this massive inflection point. Globalization, deindustrialization changed a lot, created many benefits, but there are also downsides. We've got to get this right on AI, and I think it is the most important thing for policymakers and business leaders to be grappling with. And what is, again, reassuring is that I meet as many leaders of businesses who are acutely conscious of the kind of potential social shocks and want to mitigate them, so long as they can do it in a way that doesn't harm their business. Because, the reality is, you get an announcement like Jack Dorsey did last week, and whatever it is, 20-25% pop in the share price by saying, hey, we've shed a load of people because of AI. That is going to encourage negative behaviors if we're not careful. So we have to be investing in people. And if you can show you're growing the size of the pie, rather than kind of cutting off the crusts, that's compelling.
Exactly. So I guess just to finish off, talk about some short-term and long-term views, both from a multiverse perspective and also what you think the overall climate's going to look like. So slightly existential, but things are moving very quickly. Next week, how are you spending your time? Are you on the road? Are you working a lot in Europe? Do you go to, I know you had a lot of funding from the US.
Yep.
And then after that, let's close our eyes and think 5 years' time. Okay. Where would you like to be? What do you think the future looks like?
So look, next week I'll be in Berlin again. We just bought a business in Germany. We're expanding rapidly there. Largest economy in Europe, but one of the least digitally transformed, and massive kind of macroeconomic shocks.
Right.
And a government that's committed to training 46 million workers in AI. That for us is a really interesting multiverse shaped problem. So spending a lot of time there, spending a lot of time meeting customers, meeting employers, because to be honest, it's the surest way to really understand what is happening in the labor market. And at the moment, we're not seeing yet massive job displacement linked to AI, but you can see it very clearly around the corner. And crucially, companies are beginning to stop hiring people without some form of AI aptitude or AI skilling. And that is, we're going to see ourselves in a sort of with a 2-speed workforce if we're not careful and we're not training people fast enough. 5 years out, look, for us, we want to be certainly delivering across Europe. I think Europe is so interesting for us because Europe regulates. We know how to navigate regulation. Right. You've got governments, workers' councils, unions who are committed to kind of investing in workers and making sure they don't see massive job displacement. If you can kind of bring a combination of businesses, unions, workers together to sort of figure out the best way to do this economically and effectively, I think that is a really powerful thing. And I want Multiverse to be a key part of that story. And, look, today, Europe's only EdTech unicorn. I'd love us to grow considerably beyond that. We have big ambitions. We've raised plenty of funding. We're growing more than 70% year on year as we get to the end of our financial year in March. And there's a lot to be excited about.
Yeah. It sort of plays a bit to the sovereignty agenda, doesn't it? For me, I run the UK, but we're a global firm, French-based, and it feels an all right time to be a European-based organization.
Yeah, I think that's right. AI nativism is something that probably isn't being discussed enough, right? There is a reason that the French government was so supportive of Mistral. There's a reason that we see kind of a similar impetus from governments to fund domestically headquartered AI or AI-related success stories. Because the reality is, we will get squeezed between the US and China if we cannot build really great, resilient, and fast-growing European companies. I think Europe is going to need to get its skates on things like the Draghi reforms and actually seeing AI not just through the lens of a kind of threat that needs to be mitigated against, but also starting to double down on some of those opportunities. I think it helps that in the UK, actually our government is pretty both AI friendly and keen to try and sort of encourage fast-growing businesses, startups, scale-ups. But there's more to be done.
Yeah. Good stuff. Listen, I've really enjoyed the conversation, Euan. I think we're both on the same page. The future's very bright. I'm certainly going to look forward to working with you going forwards. But just to end, I have some messages to relate to you from one of our apprentices. So he found out that I was coming to do a podcast with you. And he said, "It's amazing that you're going to see Euan Blair. Can you please thank him on my behalf as I went through an apprenticeship with Multiverse? Indeed, a group of us did. We completed the AI for Business Value apprenticeship and qualified as a level 4 business analyst last September. And we're all absolutely flying as we pass with distinction and are loving our roles."
That's awesome. And
so what you do and what your company does really makes a difference to people.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you. Thanks very much. Cheers, Michael.
Okay. Good to meet you. Thanks, Euan.